Greetings. This is a brief tutorial on how to get up and running in JackTrip on a Mac. And I'm not going to explain why you need JackTrip. I assume you want to play music on the internet and somebody said we're doing JackTrip and there's a JackTrip server somewhere and they told you its IP address. So we're just going to get a browser and look at what we need. Okay, so now we can look for JackTrip and you can get to the main site this way, but I want to recommend JackTrip. So apps with Q in front of them tend to be with Qt interfaces, also pronounced cute. So let's get JackTrip. And so let's see, here is the first search result, and it is the right one because I know Aaron Wyatt, who wrote JackTrip, and this is his website Cyborg. So JackTrip, first search result, and you're basically there. So you can read about JackTrip. Here's a sample of what its interface looks like when you're setting things up, and here's the About panel, and here's some nice documentation and installation. That's what we need, and we're doing OS X here, so we're on a Mac. So we need the Jack server, and we need JackTrip. So JackTrip manages connections to Jack, the Jack audio connection kit. So I have to say allow that, and then JackTrip I will download as well, and here it comes. So now we've got a couple of downloads and they're on their way. And I just want to point out that there's more documentation here. This tells you how to run Jack. Jack will also have a Qt interface. Here's the Jack control interface, and that's basically a Qt program that runs on the Mac that manages the Jack server. Jack itself is a server daemon. It's a file that you run and it executes in the background. It grabs the audio device that you select, and then it manages Jack connection. So a lot of different apps can connect and share the sound devices through Jack. That's what Jack is for. And then JackTrip is the nice Qt interface to JackTrip itself. JackTrip itself is a command line program with many, many options, and you can get to most of those through these forms, and that's a more convenient way to do it. So let's just see what we need. So, we've got it. Thank you very much. We're done with this. Let's just go to our downloads, and we've got Jack and JackTrip. Let's do Jack first. That's the logical order to proceed in. It's the lower level thing. So by opening this, I can see that I've got the Jack control app, and I've also got Jack 2 as an installation package. So Jack control is just the Qt app that manages Jack. This is actually Jack, and we could have downloaded that from the Jack website. But this is going to be fine. So let's open this package and install it first. This is the lowest level thing. Okay, unidentified developer. So you probably all know how to do a right click. Oops, I'm trying to do a right click. Oh, you know what? I have to tell the system to let me do that. Let's do a right click. What is that? Oh, let's just go to the mouse. Let's go to the mouse buttons. So we have to say enable secondary click. Okay. I like Smart Zoom too. I like all these things, and I actually prefer the old scroll directions. I'm going to toggle every single one of these. And now I should be able to right click. That means push on the right side of my mouse and go to the installer. And now I have the option of proceeding, in fact, in spite of the fact that this app is not signed. So let's go ahead and continue. We trust Aaron Wyatt. We trust anything he's put on his website to download. We'll agree to the GNU General Public License, free software all the way. And we're agreeing to all those terms. We'll spend all night reading those things as needed. We'll leave this install location alone. We'll say install and install with password. And now we should have Jack 2 installed. So that's not too bad. And yes, we can use the files, and we'll put it in the trash because we know where to get it. Then, so we now have Jack on the system. Now QJack Control is a pre-built app. We just need to be able to access it as an app. So I am just going to drag it into the launch thing. Let's make sure I did that. So I'm going up here and typing QJ, and you see that I have now 2 QJack controls. That's a little scary. This is a new user on this machine, but the other users of this machine have 2 other versions of QJack control, and that could pose a problem. I don't understand why this is possible. They must be in 2 separate paths. So if I go into the Finder and click on Applications, then I probably only find one JackTrip at this level, QJack control at this level, but there's probably another one in a subdirectory, more than likely here, right? Yeah, there's one, but that's the one with no icon. So I get by just fine with multiple versions of things, but some people have had problems. It is not recommended that you have multiple versions of Jack or any of these things. You should have one version, and that's enough. Okay, let's go back to our downloads. So now we've installed Jack, and we've installed QJack Control. Now we want to install QJack Trip, which is basically a version of JackTrip that will have the Qt interface. So install, password, and everything's installed. Move to trash. We're confident. What are we going to do if it doesn't work? So, sometimes you keep it if you're going to move it to another machine nearby or something like that. So then we're ready to fire up Jack. So the first step is QJack control. So let's see. I'm sure these 2 are the same, and one of these is the one we downloaded, and they are identical. So I'm just going to pick one, probably the one on the right. Oh, look, it's not allowed because the developer's not identified. So let's do the right-click thing. So now I'm going to right-click on this. Hello? It didn't let me right-click. Try that again. Well, let's just go to the Finder. Maybe that's our problem. We have to get in the Finder, go to Applications. Let's see, we're close to the Qs here. QJack Control. We'll say Open. I did a right-click on that. Okay, right-click, Open. And it just opened. That's very strange. Well, that might be the one that was already there, but if it, and I don't see the other one, I don't know where it is. It's probably in some other subdirectory. But now we have QJack control running, and it will run Jack for us. Jack is not running yet. See, it says stopped right here. That's in the status. So if we go to setup, we can set the sampling rate, and everyone I know in the JackTrip world uses 48 kilohertz for the sampling rate. It's the number of digital audio samples per second, and that's really good, high quality sound. And the other thing you really have to set is frames per period. I would call that buffer size. I would call that the audio buffer size. It's the number of samples per buffer for any channel. And we normally only send one channel, sometimes 2 channels. And if you can get away with 64, that's good. That's a 64 sample buffer that's transmitted when your music goes out over the internet. And so very often you'll see people trying to get by with that. And if it's too small, maybe they'll go up because a larger buffer is a little more immune to the jitter distortion of the internet and the randomness of everything. And if you can't get by with 64 samples, that's only 1.3 milliseconds. That's really a good latency. So at 48 kilohertz. So that's usually all you have to change, because you're going to want a core audio driver. That's the usual Mac thing. And there's some advanced options here that you hopefully don't need to change. I personally have needed to change this name because I use multiple installations, And so Mac Ports installs it differently than Brew, and this was a direct installation. And so I would expect to find this in user local bin. If you know about standard, installation practice, user local bin should have JackD in it. And that's the daemon. That's the program that runs in the background and manages connections. All the other programs that want to listen to and feed sound to the internet can go to JackD, and you network things. It creates a network of sound apps, and it's very efficient. They're all sort of welded together into one audio callback for the operating system, and that's a really nice thing. So let's see if it'll start. Let's just say starting. No. Why? Oh, you know what my problem is probably that I've got an interface. I have an audio interface that is not supporting the sampling rate. I have to actually change the audio interface to 48 kilohertz in order for it to support that. So instead, I'll just go into sound. I'll just type that in, go into sound, and look at the input and make that the built-in microphone. So the iConnect Audio 4 is what I usually use. It's a better quality thing. And so I have iMac Pro speakers out, and I have iMac microphone in. So this is just a plain vanilla Apple hardware scenario. And the reason it should find that is because the choice is that under, no, it's over here. So the choice of interface is default. Here I could force a choice. I could pick the built-in speaker. I could use Black Hole, which is a programmatic. It's kind of an alternative to Jack for connecting audio. But by taking default, then you should get the system choice. And so now I expect this to work because I know the Mac can handle this, and we're not using any funny new device. And so that's our setup, and we didn't change anything here, so we have to cancel because we didn't change anything in QJack control. We just changed it in the system. Now we hope it will start. Started. And that's what you want to see. You want to see started. And let me just say, by the way, if you see the word active here, that means you didn't change anything. That means there was already a JackD daemon running, and it will ignore anything you do in this form. You can try to change the sample rate, try to change the buffer size, and it just won't have any difference because it's already active. And when you hit start, it'll still say active. So that's just a little bit about Jack and how you run it from QJack control. And the other thing you're going to want is the graph for plotting what you have. So this is our microphone. I can send the microphone straight to the speaker and get a nice feedback loop. But what we're going to do is we're going to run JackTrip, and we'll feed the microphone into its input, and then it will send something out to the internet, and then something will come back, and then that will come to our playback. Okay, let's try it. So now we need to run JackTrip, and this is JackTrip. You can actually run it at a command line with the same options as JackTrip, and it'll act just like JackTrip. But if you execute it in the command line with no options, then it'll launch this interface, and that's what's happening here with the app. So now we're just joining somebody else's internet ensemble, and so somebody has set up a hub server, and they told us its IP address and what buffer size to use and sampling rate, which will probably be 48 kilohertz. And all we want to do is be a hub client. These two are for peer-to-peer, and so you can also run JackTrip in peer-to-peer mode, and that's another way to go. But the really scalable solution is the hub client and hub server. So you can have any number of clients connecting to a server, and you really can have or more than 100 clients talking to the same server, sending music back and forth. It's pretty amazing. So we want to be a hub client, and so somebody has told us our IP address. I'm just going to try a server that I know is running in a test mode called jackloop64.stanford.edu. And so that's a test server that will be clapping. It'll give me some clapping. It'll give me 3 claps in a space, 3 claps in a rest. And let's live dangerously and send 2 channels. If 2 channels works, it's really best because you can hear stereo. You can send stereo and hear stereo. But if that's not, if your internet connection is not fast enough, you can go down to 1. So let's do 2 channels and hope for the best. Also, buffer underrun should I think set to 0. I wouldn't let buffers repeat. I would clear them like that. And you have authentication options here. So let's just briefly see the advanced options. These custom client names are valuable if you're, let's say you want to be string section, and then there's somebody at the server who can get everyone in the string section into a single mix, that kind of thing. And you probably never want to change this. You would need to change this if you had more than one server. These are the TCP ports that are used between the client and server to set up a connection. They're only used at the beginning of the connection. TCP is a reliable transmission protocol. And then you get a UDP connection set up, which is not reliable, meaning that packets can be dropped and people won't wait around for them. So, you can't wait around when you're doing music. But you do want to wait around when you're negotiating a connection. This is a queue buffer length. I usually leave it at the default. It's, how many buffers of padding you have. It absorbs jitter, it kind of hides the jitter of the internet packets. And everybody uses 16 bits. 32 bits probably works, but I don't think 24 bits work, and I don't think 8 bits work right now. So, and everybody just uses 16 bits. And that's really good. I mean, that's your CD quality. That's very good. So now let's, the jitter buffer is an advanced feature. The nice thing about that is that it will set the queue automatically based on how many dropouts it finds. So it will aim to drop no more than 1 in every 500 packets, and so it'll keep raising the queue size until that's true. And so, you can try that. The broadcast output is normally just used on the server to record what's going on with a large buffer, because it doesn't matter how long it takes. It can use a long buffer and absorb a lot of jitter and get a better recording or broadcast to like OBS, that kind of thing. And then there's some strategy options here for how the jitter buffer is managed, which I won't get into. That's pretty advanced. There's some help information if you run the program and look at its documentation. Just run the program with no arguments. That would be JackTrip. And maybe Aaron Wyatt's website has some of that. Yeah, I didn't go over all that. Okay, finally, plugins. These are Faust plugins that are implemented in JackTrip, so they're always there. And the most important one is an outgoing limiter. You really, really want that, because if you overflow, then you will make such a bad noise without a limiter. And you're probably not going to overflow if you're just going straight in. But if you have the most common case I see is where people have a stereo microphone and they mix it down to one channel by just summing the channels, then it will overflow or can overflow, and then you get that awful noise, which is called wraparound, where the largest the number goes up to 1 internally and then wraps around to -1 in the audio, and it's a very, very, very loud, bad noise. And then the compressor gives you a little more headroom before limiting, and I always use these two for sure. And sometimes I'll put on a little reverb. This is kind of a gentle reverb for what's coming back to me. And this is also nice when if you had to go down to one channel. That means you can only listen one channel. You can't send and receive a different number of channels. So you're stuck in mono. Well, the stereo of the reverb is a help in that case. So you have this frontal signal coming in, but all of the reflections in the reverb can bounce all around in stereo. And so Freeverb is a kind of a nice light reverb. Zeta Rev is a very rich reverb. It was developed for a pipe organ kind of environment. But you have a lot of controls, and the controls can be brought out at the command line. So if you're interested in that, you have to look at the command line options and follow those. Okay, so that's enough of that, and we can, let's set up a little reverb. Why not? I'll also make it more obvious. You can have them both. I'll make it more obvious so that if this works, you'll hear reverb. Yeah, I'll make it really obvious. Okay, so why wouldn't this just work? So let's go back to the basic page and press connect. So it's 6 claps in a space. And you can use this clap test to sort of get a feel for your latency. You can try clapping along with it, and then you'll hear your own clap mixed in, if I've got the right options. So I'm going to try to clap along. No, I don't have I'm in the wrong mode for that. So I'm going to disconnect and go back to advanced options, and in the command line it's like -P4, and I'm just looking for where that is. Oh, by the way, you can get the command line. You can see what your command line is. There's no -P at all. That's interesting. Well, just let me tell you that there is that, in which case you get a loop back of yourself. And I always do that. I always use the command line and always have -P4, whereas this sounds like -P2, which omits you in what you get sent back to you, so that you have to have your own local monitoring. But then your perception of your timing relative to everybody else is different from what everybody else hears. And I don't understand that. I would never do that. That doesn't make any sense. But, there are a lot of people like it like that, and it's even the default, it appears. So it's probably here in the command line options, and I can't find it, but I'll just end this tutorial since I'm at the point where I need a tutorial. So that's how you get going on Jack and JackTrip and QT interfaces all around. Oh, so let's gracefully tear things down. We're connected. We're disconnected right now, so let's exit. And here we will stop the Jack server. It should be okay with that since it's got no client. If it has clients, it'll warn you. And then you can now quit QJack control because Jack is gone, and that's the clean way to finish. Okay, so happy Jack tripping.